Free agency has started for the NFL and the Buffalo Bills. They've added some players, they've lost some players, and they've extended some players. We're going to go over the first few days of free agency with all of you right now. Let's go!
Hi, I'm Bills defensive end Greg Rousseau, and you're listening to Nate and the Fellas on Circling the Wagons podcast. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Go Bills!
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo! Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo!
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Hey, what is up, Bills Mafia? Welcome to another episode of Circling the Wagons, a Buffalo fan base podcast. I am your host, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to discuss Buffalo Bills free agency thus far. The first few days, the tampering period is over with. The Bills have signed some players, let some players go and test the market, and, extended some players. They've also traded a player away. So we're going to discuss all those things, talk about our favorites, our least favorites, things that are we up or down in general on this free agency thus far. And we'll go from there. So first, I'd like to welcome my co-host John again to the podcast. John, man, how you feeling? Good. You think? Let's go right into your feelings and thoughts on free agency in general. When you look at what the Bills have done, mind you, we're recording on Thursday night, and things may happen right after we record, or later when you hear this, maybe on a Friday or Saturday. But John, your overall thoughts on this draft? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Are you meh? How are you feeling?
Optimistic. They've already started to address several needs. They brought in 3 defensive linemen already. Receiver, safety depth. They've re-signed guys. They've extended guys. The extensions, I think, were important. I know some of these guys were going to be up in 2026. I was really worried about next year's free agents. So they've already started to address that. The Josh Allen big contract, they've done some good things. I'm optimistic. They have 10 draft picks.
So there's a lot of things. So let me just get to the point where the best part of free agency, in my opinion, so far, and let me know if you agree or disagree, has been the extensions. It feels like all the players that they brought in that they got extensions out of, you're talking about here, Sal Bernard signed an extension, Greg Rousseau signed an extension, Josh Allen you just mentioned, and then there was Reed Ferguson, Reggie Gilliam, Ty Johnson. Those guys were free agents, but we re-signed them. Ryan Vandermark, Damar Hamlin, like those. I like the players that they've kept because it doesn't feel like they kept them just because they had to. Like these guys are all important pieces on the roster, or are vying for starting spots. When I'm talking about like Damar Hamlin, Ty Johnson, maybe not Ty Johnson vying for a starting spot, but Reed Ferguson, obviously the long snapper. I like the extensions the most out of this. I love the fact that we're going to keep Josh Allen here through 2030. I love that. I love the fact that he's not the absolute highest paid quarterback in the league. He has the most guaranteed money in NFL history, but he's not the most, or at least in the NFL right now, but he's not the most highest paid quarterback on average. And that's going to change as soon as the next quarterback contract comes up, right? Like I love all those things. I would say that the Bills free agency, and I need to know your thoughts on this because I don't know if I'm alone on this. And if you're listening or watching this live stream and want to give a comment, feel free. But to me, this free agency has been, it's not bad with the players that they pick up. Like I'm talking about Rams wide receiver Josh Palmer, defensive lineman Michael Hoecht from the Rams, running back Darrington Evans, which we've seen before, defensive end Joey Bosa, defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi, and safety Darrick Forrest. Like I'm okay with them. I don't think, the problem is, John, is we get so into these like, oh, I want Myles Garrett, or I want DK Metcalf, or Deebo Samuel, or whatever. And then we don't get them. And like, instead of Myles Garrett, we get Joey Bosa. And I'm like, like I like Joey Bosa. Don't get me wrong. I like him better when he's completely healthy, but he might not be available if he's fully healthy. So I thought it was meh. What were your thoughts on like the free agents they've added to the roster? Because when I look at it, I don't see a lot of, I think it's a lot of speculation and hoping that these guys won't be injured.
It's a blockbuster move. Every fan wants that. So, but I think they're doing it right. They got a lot of role players. The Joey Bosa move, there's the injury history and things like that, but they're taking a chance on him. It's only a 1-year deal. And they got released Von Miller, so it kind of replaces that. He is younger than Von, at least. But no, I like Michael Hoecht. I think he's going to be a good rotational guy. I like what you said about the extensions. Like the guys they extended are the best at their position on the roster right now. Josh Allen, Khalil Shakir, Terrell Bernard, and Greg Rousseau are the best players on the roster at those positions. You mentioned the guys that resigned. Reed Ferguson, obviously, like he's been solid. You mentioned Vandermark. Alec Anderson's another guy they resigned. He's been, Mr. Eligible every play last year, pretty much. Gilliam, Ty Johnson. The good thing about Ty Johnson and even bringing back Darrington Evans is because with the whole James Cook situation, everybody behind James Cook has been consistent here, right? We had Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, Frank Gore Jr. from last year too, Darrington Evans. So they have all that consistency. So if something were to happen or they don't retain Cook or they trade him, whatever happens, or there's supposed to be good draft running backs, they have that consistency behind whoever ends up starting it. And I think that's going to be good.
So one of the things that, we talked about our big list of Bills needs, right? So after the season, we talked about defensive line help, either, pass rush help in general. If you want to beat the Chiefs, you got to get in some pass rush. And our guy K-Gun Scooter just said, got some high motor guys. Absolutely. It feels like that's pretty much the theme of this Bills free agency thus far, especially when you're talking about guys like Michael Hoecht, guys like, who is it, Darrick Forrest, the safety out of the Commanders, guys like that. They're not completely proven guys as far as, these guys can be starters game in and game out, and they can be game breakers for you, but there's upside, and the Bills could hopefully coach that upside out of them, right? The thing that gets me is, we're also talking about the back end, John. We're talking about, hey, my thought was always, if you can't get immediate pass rush help in the form of a Myles Garrett, in the form of a Max Crosby, in the form of who's another defensive end that was on the market up until recently. I can't even think, but there's another one I'm that either stayed or got traded or whatever. But like, if you can't get one of those guys, get the back end guys, because allow your pass rushers more time to rush the passer by better coverage, right? Like the Bills were kind of missing that in their safeties last season. Not bad, but it could have been better because we're used to Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer being back there. So I don't think they necessarily got better in the secondary right now. As of now, Rasul Douglas is not the team. Has Rasul Douglas signed with anyone? I don't think so.
It's still available.
So I mean, there's been talks about the Bills potentially landing Asante Samuel Jr. I don't know if he's signed yet. As of now, I don't think he has. The problem is, though, even if you sign Asante Samuel Jr., like, I don't necessarily know if that's a big step up from Rasul Douglas. I mean, Rasul Douglas was solid. Sure, last year wasn't great, but it wasn't bad by any stretch, right? It wasn't Khair Elam bad, which the Bills traded. If they don't bring back Rasul Douglas, they have a hole. And if they end up filling with Asante Samuel Jr., I will be like, okay, that's great. It's not a huge upgrade. It's not head and shoulders. I think it's good. I think it's a good upgrade, but you're still talking and looking at Rapp and Hamlin right now as the starting safeties, which I wasn't a huge fan of. Maybe hopefully Cole Bishop is fighting for that role, but we're all going off speculation, I guess. We're all hoping for upside with this free agency class. It's just we don't have anything to prove that, okay, on paper, this defense specifically, because I think the offense is in decent shape, this defense specifically is better at the secondary or the defensive line level. We're thinking we can. We're thinking Michael Hoecht is going to get some pressure at, maybe the defensive tackle position. Maybe he goes in on obvious passing downs next to Ed Oliver. That's definitely a potential possibility. Joey Bosa could be an upgrade over Von Miller in that. But to me, with even the Joey Bosa signing, it's kind of like, we're trading Von Miller out, an injured older veteran, for Joey Bosa, who's less old but injured, and we're just hoping he doesn't get injured this year. So just not like, okay, I can walk away from this free agency saying we're definitely in better shape than we were, because I hope we are, but to me, there's no proof that we definitely are. You know what I mean? It's all speculation at this point. We're all hoping that these guys trend up, that they don't get injured, and that they have their best season ever, basically.
I think our biggest needs are still defensive line and defensive back. But I'm still optimistic. I think they've been making good moves to get role guys, and it's only a couple days into free agency. They were going to get more role guys. They have 65 guys on their roster. They got to get to 90 by training camp, so they got a long ways to go. Like I say, they got a ton of draft picks, so we got to see where it goes. I think things are trending where like corner is going to probably end up being their biggest need, and if there's a guy available for their first pick, that could be that. I just don't want them to fall into this trap where they're drafting Kyrie Elam again, or that kind of thing.
Where someone reaches above them and gets Trent McDuffie, so we can't get him, and we get stuck with a first round bust.
Speaking of which, it's a good lead-in.
It's a good transition.
They traded Kyrie Elam. They fleeced the Cowboys. They ended up getting a 5th round pick.
A 5th round this year and a 7th round next year for a 6th round this year, right? Something
Yes.
like they netted a pick basically.
Yeah. So and they end up with like 10 picks this year. They have they have 3 in the 5th round, and like in the 6th round they have like the first pick of the 6th. So they have like 4 picks in 9 spots at the end of the 5th, beginning of the 6th round, basically. So that will be interesting. They don't have any picks in the 7th or the 3rd rounds. So, but
Interesting.
2 picks in the 2nd. So they got 10 picks. That's a lot.
Yeah. The Bears, what was it, their 3rd round pick or 4th round pick? So that ended up being like it's basically like a 3rd round pick because the Bears didn't finish that well. So that's good. Okay, let's talk about like your favorite. Let's not even talk about free agency move, because if we're talking like total move, John, I think the Kyrie Elam trade was one of my favorite moves that Brandon Beane did. I mean, he absolutely, like, you texted me when it happened. You're like, the Bills robbed the Cowboys, right? Like, the fact that they were able to trade Kyrie Elam in general, especially with the highlight reel of him falling down against Hollywood, or was it was DeAndre Hopkins in the AFC Championship game? I think that was an amazing pickup by Beane to be able to get. I would have given away draft picks just to trade him, because you save $2.5 million by doing that. So the Bills saved $2.5 million in the cap, and they got an extra pick out of it. Scott says, I would have taken a number 4 order from Taco Bell from Elam. That's even better. I would absolutely take that for that. So the fact that thank God that Brandon Beane is our GM. Like, I might be critical of the free agents that they've signed to a point, but in the end, I mean, he's doing a great job of that. So, John, what was your favorite overall move of free agency? I'm going to take the Josh Allen extension out of it because that's too easy. Oh, like the third quarterback, we all love that. We all, we all get a quarter chub out of that. So let's talk about something else. What else? What was one of your favorite moves?
I'm gonna say, I mean, the Kyrie Elam one's nice too, but I'll go with Michael Hoecht. I think I like him. I think I've seen him play. I think he will be a contributor.
You know what? So this is part of my PTSD from the Bills. It's not even drought PTSD. It's more like Beane's defensive line PTSD, because whenever I see one of these sort of defensive tackles that I get excited about, that the Bills sign in free agency, I think about Tim Settle. I think about Quentin Jefferson. I think about Poona Ford. I think about, Jordan Phillips. And I'm just like, all these guys that I had high hopes for, just end up never. What'd you say?
Boogie Basham.
Boogie, yeah. They just never amount to much, and they become too much of a tweener that they don't really have. I mean, a defensive tackle, like, the Bills have not really hit on that position. Ed Oliver, I think, is good. If I had to choose as far as, what to add on defensive line, like, I want a stud one technique next to Ed Oliver, and, an upgrade over Daquan Jones, so that Daquan Jones can, come in, but he's more of a rotational guy than the starter, right? So, because I think that Ed Oliver, unfortunately, it's just the way he is. It's just the way that because of his size and because of the way he plays, he needs a stud next to him to play his best football. So when you upgrade that other position, you're actually getting a better player out of Ed Oliver too. So that's what I would have went to. This guy, Michael Hoecht, isn't that guy. He's not that one technique that I was kind of hoping for. He's not an upgrade over Daquan Jones necessarily. I was looking for more of like a 340-pound guy, not a 310-pound guy who's like super athletic. Like that's great, and we'll
He's not
still
going to
take it.
play. He's not going to play there. He's going to be like edge slash linebacker type of player.
You think he's going to come in on
Like
pass rushing downs?
yeah, like he's like yeah between
So
him and like Bosa too, like and like how Von Miller was. Like I think they both kind of fit that kind of role.
yeah. So what do you think that Michael Hoecht then is just going to be like edge rusher?
So I think I'm not sure how they're going to use him because he can play multiple positions. Bosa's kind of pigeonholed. He's going to be a pass rusher, right? So he's going to play less snaps. He's going to be like the Von Miller. But Hoyt can do other things. He can cover guys. He can whatever. So that will be interesting, I think. And I think that's why I like that move because of that versatility.
So he's going to be like a Lorenzo Alexander, you think, like that sort of role for the Bills? Like, because remember, Lorenzo Alexander would play defensive tackle. He'd play edge rusher. He'd, drop into coverage and linebacker sometimes. Like, he was a Swiss Army knife. He's the best Swiss Army knife player that the Bills have had in that sort of role. And they have never found a replacement for him. Did you notice that?
Yeah. We got him late in his career, too.
Yeah, we did. We did. I think, again, I'd love it if he could play that role. The Bills just haven't found a guy that can be a hybrid. Remember, we always thought Greg Rousseau, like he would kick in on the inside and he'd rush. He really hasn't panned out that way. We thought that about Boogie Basham. We thought that about other guys the Bills have got. Oh, Quinn Jefferson. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can play edge and he can line up in three technique. And they never really found a way
Shaq
to.
Lawson and
Shaq, thank you. Shaq Lawson's a great example too. They just haven't. So it's not that he can't do it. I'm just haven't seen proof.
I still like Rousseau a lot. I think he's more of like a number 2 defensive end. They just need a guy to be the number 1.
Which is perfect in this role because Joey Bosa, I mean, Greg Rousseau, I really like Greg Rousseau a lot. I'm glad they extended him. And for the most part, we didn't mention this, but like a lot of these guys, they got on good value, including Rousseau, which probably could have gone for a lot more money if they'd waited another year or so, or, he hit free agency. He's their best pass rusher right now. Greg Rousseau is their best pass rusher. And I guess, he needs, I was reading something that I think Joe Biscaglia brought up that Greg Rousseau's best pass rushing side is, I believe, the left side. But since Von Miller only, for the most part, came in on passing downs, he took that side. So Greg Rousseau would be pass rushing from the right side. And Greg Rousseau is still their best pass rusher. So I'm excited that he can go to the left side now with Von Miller gone. Maybe that's an upgrade at both sides, right? Like this could be the best pass rushing defensive end combo that we've had in a while, potentially, since Von Miller of 2022, right? This could be that. So I'm excited for that, but health again on Joey Bosa's side. So I want to say one of the other, we didn't talk about wide receiver Josh Palmer. The Bills signed him to a 3-year deal. I believe it was $36 million. So like a much bigger deal than Curtis Samuel even got last year. We kind of forget Curtis Samuel in general. He will be back again this season. He started to catch a little bit of fire at the end of last year. Part of that could have been his chemistry with Josh. Part of that could have been the injuries that he dealt with from training camp on, turf toe injury and anything else. But it seems like another one of those guys. But they finally have, John, a guy that can actually separate and get some separation. Because if you're looking for wide receivers, one of the things that we mentioned, you have to have speed or you have to be able to get open, because the Bills were one of the last in the NFL in wide receiver average yards of separation. Because you think about Keon Coleman, not a great separator. Big guy, not a great separator. Khalil Shakir, great yak guy, not a great separator. Amari Cooper, that's why we brought him in, because he was supposed to be a good separator. He was okay, wasn't great. And he never really took off with Josh Allen, but this is the guy that's that separator. He gets separation. He's one of the best in the league at that. So they got their guy in that respect, John. So your thoughts on the Josh Palmer signing? Not a fast guy. He's like a 4.52 guy, 40-yard. It's not blazing speed by any means, but he can get separation. And that's what we need, right?
Put in somebody. I don't know if I'm going to hold my breath. He's definitely talented. It just hasn't translated into production. I get that, he's had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams on his team and this and that, but no, it's good. I think it's worth a shot. He's a talented guy.
A talented guy with a good quarterback previously, but just never put up big numbers. So again, this is kind of like my point earlier, where we're speculating that that Josh Allen can bring out the best in him. Do I have faith that he can? I think so. But I guess where I was coming off is not pessimistic, but less than enthusiastic about free agency so far is that you're losing Amari Cooper and Matt Collins, right? Like arguably one of the most talented receivers on your roster in Amari Cooper, and the receiver that had the most touchdowns on your roster in Matt Collins. And you basically replaced him with Josh Palmer, which again, not necessarily a downgrade, but I guess I just don't see it as a significant upgrade than that,
You
if at all.
you can't compare 2 versus 1. So, how would you rank the 3, 1, 2, and 3?
Well, I haven't seen enough of Josh Palmer just besides highlights and his stats. But I mean, I'd say they're probably similar to Matt Collins' stats before he got to Buffalo.
But like as players, right? So you're commenting on Josh Palmer being like a good separator. Maybe he can win contested catches, but so can Amari Cooper. Matt Collins is good on special teams and can run block. Can Palmer do like you got? How would they all have different attributes, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not an easy 1-for-1. Scott just came in. He said Palmer, great, gets great grades with separation, large route tree, solid body that can block. Chargers fans are pissed he wasn't re-signed by the Bolts. And one of the best things to decide if it's a good free agent move, like Scott points out from 24/7 Buff Fandemonium on the Buffalo Fan Base Podcast Network. One of the things that he points out, is seeing what those fan bases like. Are they like, oh, good? Because if Cowboys fans looked at the Buffalo Bills fans and said, oh, like, how is Kaiir Elam? Should we be excited? And we'd be like, no, good luck.
Say yes until they traded for him, and then be like,
I hear we're trading for. Is that good? And like, we'll see. Maybe. Like, good one, guys. So, yeah, I mean, it's not an equal. I guess I just look at 2 guys for 1 guy, and if it was like 2 guys for, Jordan Jefferson or whatever, I'm like, oh, that's obviously. But I think we're all speculating. I know they're going to add a guy in the draft. I imagine they're probably. We just got word that the Bills are potentially adding Laviska Shenault on a 1-year deal, but that's more of like a return specialist / depth wide receiver. But he's kind of like, I mean, we were talking about Curtis Samuel. I mean, he's kind of like Curtis Samuel, like light. Like he'll be a running back. He'll be a wide receiver. Like he can kind of play those roles. So. Yeah, I guess I was just hoping for a splash at this round, but there weren't a whole lot of great wide receivers. Would you have traded a 5th for Deebo Samuel, since he went? That's what he went to for the Commanders.
They have 3 5th-round picks. I mean, they just got the 2
compensatory picks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Would you? Do they get you?
Of course, Deebo Samuel just had his worst season, right? So
yeah, so Keon Coleman, and Cooper, for that matter, both had injuries in the middle of the year, and I think that kind of might have affected both of them in different ways. So hopefully Keon can take a step forward here. I know, everybody's they want results now, even with rookie receivers, but traditionally in the past, it's sometimes you got to wait till year 3 for the breakout, sometimes year 2. But so I'm still optimistic with Keon. I'm not as optimistic anymore about Kincaid necessarily.
Same.
Especially with Knox still there and everything. I just don't see Knox is the better blocker. He's the more complete tight end. So he's probably going to be in there more. And Kincaid is this kind of in between guy. He more of a slot guy like Shakir, but Shakir's the best slot guy. So I'm not sure how that's going to end up.
I think part of Kincaid's issue is it's recency bias, because the last time we saw him play, he was dropping a 4th and 22 pass or whatever it ended up being that Josh.
Yeah. No, I'm not biasing it. I recognize he was also playing hurt through all that too. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying as an overall.
His hands weren't hurt though. So yeah.
Well, that was one of the reasons they drafted him, as well as Coleman, is because of their hands.
I mean, they finally have starting wide receivers, including Palmer, have great hands. Like their receivers and tight ends, for the most part, have really good hands. That's one of the reasons, so they added a lot. They had less drops this year than previous years. They had a lot of yak, which they never had, yards after catch, that they didn't have in previous years. They excelled in a lot of those areas. Some of that having to do with James Cook. Hopefully he doesn't hold out. But I think also part of Dalton Kincaid's problems were the expectations that we, the fan base, Bills Mafia, put on him, because think about that. Like, we went into the season thinking like he could be the number one wide receiver for Josh Allen. And I don't even know if he's finished top 6 or 7, to be honest. I think he's probably in that range. So not even close to the first target as far as targets or yardage, receptions. He's not in that realm. So I think it was expectation. I think it was the injuries, of course. And I think it was just chemistry. Like, it's just not clicking between him and Josh. It's either the role that he's getting from his offensive coordinator, or he's just not getting that chemistry, and they just haven't found a way to use him, which is unfortunate because right now, I mean, it's early and we thought that Spencer Brown was a bust, 2-3 years into his career, and he ended up being one of the best right tackles. It feels kind of like Dalton Kincaid's trending toward bust. Then this is a guy that we can count on after Dawson Knox leaves.
Like Kincaid, I just don't think he's gonna necessarily live up to the draft capital that he had.
Yeah, especially because we traded up to get him too. Remember, we traded ahead of the Cowboys.
I know, because the Cowboys wanted him.
But yeah, I think another year for Keon Coleman, you were saying, will do them some good. John, if we mentioned all the wide receivers the Bills have lost, the ones that they've gained, the receivers that are on the roster. If you could add any type of wide receiver to the roster, I'm talking, you could get a guy. I mean, obviously Megatron. We'd love to add Megatron to the roster, but like if there was a specific, if there's a specific characteristic
I'm very ready.
that you would add for a wide receiver, the next wide receiver they get, you're like, oh, that's good. I was hoping they would get a guy with insert
Speed.
the blank character. Speed, right?
Speed. No, speed is number one right now. They have Shakir, he's getting some yak. They got Coleman, who's got the possession capability. Samuel's kind of a gadget guy. But they got Paul. They signed Palmer, so we'll see what he's going to do for us. But
I think Palmer's going to be the X wide receiver. I think he's going to be the guy. Because he's only 6 foot. He's not like big. I think he's going to be like the Stephon Diggs, and then Keon Coleman's going to be the Y. I'm sorry, the Z wide receiver. I'm sorry, the Z is the one that is off the line. So he's a guy that's not usually as big, that can get separation, or that needs a little bit of space to get separation if a guy's playing man. So I think he'd be a good Z wide receiver. I think the X is Keon Coleman right now because he's bigger, more physical.
He's a speedy guy, though. And that goes for the defense. Like, they're slow on defense. It's like, oh, they re-signed Hamlin. Oh, great. He's slow. Okay. And like they're signing 30-year-old defensive linemen. Yeah, great. They're might be good, but they need more speed on defense too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Darrick Forrest, the safety, he has 4.41 speed, so he's not slow. He's got more speed than DeMar Hamlin does, right? Like, so I think he's going to play that role. He's going to probably compete with Rapp and Bishop for that role. So hopefully, no matter what, we end up with a better safety duo than we had last year. Either they all get better with time because they're all pretty young, really. Rapp, I think, is 26 or 27 now, and he's the oldest. So, like, it's a matter of which one is the cream that rises to the top at the safety level, right? But again, this isn't like a Javon Holland or anything like that where you're just like, oh, that's a great safety, right? Like, this is a good, pickup. Just not, head and shoulder. But then again, sometimes I get a little bit impatient as a Bills fan, and I'm like, man, how come they didn't get a Myles Garrett or like, some big splash? And then I'm like, oh, they did that with Von Miller, and it was good for 11 games, and then it was terrible. So,
like, unforeseen circumstances, he got hurt. If he didn't get hurt, I mean, he was doing really well. Like, it was a good signing.
Exactly, but unforeseen circumstances, you can't
predict an injury like that. So
no, I agree, but I agree. At the time, you couldn't predict that he was going to get injured, just like any of these guys. And I think you're right, John. Here's a good hypothetical for you. If Von Miller doesn't have that ACL injury, is he still with the team after this season, or would they still cut him loose? You think?
Well, I mean, that a few years ago, so a lot could have happened in between. But you'd think they'd at least keep him through where they did when he wasn't good after the injury. Yeah, maybe. I mean, he was taking pay cuts to try to help him out and stuff last year, right?
If he had a regular season though, last season, the season before, he wouldn't have taken a pay cut because he'd have played well, right? I mean, he was good those first 11 games. If he had finished out that season with double-digit sacks, and the next season, even if he took a step back, he just,
But
I mean,
even if he had 10 sacks every year, like, what is he, 35 now?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
This was the year for his 3 years. It was his out. Yeah, and it's possible they still bring him back. We'll see.
I
He's
don't,
has
I don't, I don't know if they're gonna with Bosa and Hoyt signed. It's to bring another older guy in. It seems like a bit much, but I don't know.
One other move I was really glad, a free agent they re-signed. We talked about, Alec Anderson, Reed Ferguson, guys that they, were basically going to hit the market, and then the Bills re-signed them. But I mean, I was so happy. I was a little discouraged when they signed Darrington Evans first, because I'm like, oh, I wonder if this means that they're not bringing back Ty Johnson. But I was psyched when they brought him back for a 2-year deal, John. That was actually like one of my favorite, if we don't count extensions, one of my favorite moves, because not only is this the best running back room that I think the Bills have had in a long time, he could have that much bigger of a role if by any chance there is a James Cook contract holdout. I mean, his role is that much better. And I feel really good because he was in on a lot of third downs. They trusted him a lot on third down to either close out games or, go ahead with points, when it was a close game. So I was really happy about that one.
Yeah, Ty Johnson, he has really surprised me with his pass catching abilities and his route running. Like Ray Davis was supposed to be like the de facto number 2 last year, and I think Ty Johnson overtook him. I don't think anybody they have on the roster is going to be an RB1 outside of James Cook. I think they're all rotational guys. So if they don't end up with Cook, I think they do need to bring somebody else in, and it's probably like a draft pick or something, and trading Cook for something in the process. I don't. 15 million seems like way too much for me for a running back.
Yeah, no way. Absolutely not.
And you've heard me over the years on like during the drought, especially where they're. I think I probably even said it in the last podcast. Like, forget it. This is too much. I get there's been success recently with older running backs with Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and this and that. But like, I think in the like overall grand scheme of things, I think it's not as important to have like the top guy. Just have a really good guy or a good guy in there. I mean, we saw it with like Fred Jackson. Like Fred Jackson was awesome, undrafted free agent. I'm not saying he was like more talented than some of the first round picks he played with, but he played really well, right? So I don't know.
He was much more steady and reliable than the other guys. So here, John, let me put it to you this way, because you're actually the perfect person to ask this question, because you hate drafting running backs on day one in general, and or day two, even maybe even day two with second round picks. You've been a fan of James Cook since the beginning, probably before a lot of fans were. You also don't like paying running backs at all. You don't like drafting guys early. You don't like paying them. James Cook is probably one of your favorite running back prospects that the Bills have had in recent history, and for good reason. You called it before a lot of us did. You've been a fan, and even you're saying that, like, you have this guy who you've been a big fan of, you've been rooting for since he got in. You've liked what you've seen. He's only gotten better. He had a career year last season, over 1,000 yards. Was it like 18 touchdowns? Like, great season overall from James Cook, his best season. And you're still saying don't pay him, right? Like, that's how much you feel like either your thoughts on the running back, you know, position in general, or just James Cook, or both, because you've been a fan and you're still biased and saying I wouldn't re-sign him for 15 million.
There's a lot of factors in that, but yeah, that's right. They have a really great offensive line that's still intact. They can bring somebody in, and they're probably not going to fail as long as they don't like really mess up the pick. I know they want to go run heavy, but I still don't think it's worth it, or they can use that money at these other positions of need. And as far as drafting, if they have the luxury of drafting a guy at the end of the first round, even though it's a first round pick, that's cool. But I don't know if they have that luxury this year with some of the question marks on defensive line and a defensive back. I still like the best player available approach, but you have to have your tiers. So like if the running back is in the same tier as like other positions of need, then you gotta go for the positions of need. if the running back is that much tiered above the other positions that are available at the time, then I guess you have to go for it. It's just not something that I would necessarily want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So I want to get into the draft and the rest of free agency, but let me first ask you, what grade would you give this free agent? Real quick, I want to get to this point before we talk grading free agency. Scott's in again, man. He's just crushing it. He says, does Shavers make the cut? 4.3 speed, been a system guy that remains on the team. Man, that is an excellent point. I kind of forgot about Tyrell Shavers a little bit.
Like Shavers, but yeah, I don't know.
This could be his year. Undrafted guy. This is his third season now? Second season? Third season? I can't remember. I think it's third. 6'4", I believe, 4.3 speed. He had that one play against the Patriots where he had like a 60-yard touchdown. One catch, one reception, 60-yard touchdown. Maybe
Nothing
we already
else.
have him on the roster.
Yeah, if nothing else changes, it will, because they're going to bring other receivers in, at least one in the draft, probably, right? He's going to be fighting for the number 5 spot currently, and Chanel they just brought in Jalen Virgil, but so
If it's
5 or
against a
6.
rookie, the rookie makes it, right? I mean, unless it's a day 3 pick.
If it's a 6th round rookie versus a 2nd round rookie, yeah, it makes a difference. But
True.
and free agency isn't over yet. What if they bring back Stephon Diggs? Just kidding.
Everything's fine now, no drama. It's like your buddy that gets back with his ex-girlfriend. Like, it's like, hey, I thought you guys hated each other. No, we're back in love more than ever. It's like, oh, okay. Hopefully this works out. Okay, John. So grade for this, we're going to wrap this up soon, but grade for this free agency in general, if you had to give it a letter grade, obviously A being the best, F being the worst, if you didn't know, what would you give this free agency, including everything, extensions, players,
Extensions,
they've seen?
re-signings, everything. Okay, so it's early still. It's like what Wednesday was. So it's been a little over 24 hours basically since
Yeah.
the real free agency period started. Let's see here, like extensions. I'm thinking. I'm just kind of like talking out loud here. Extensions are like A, right?
Yeah.
Resign are, let's see, Ferguson, Alec Anderson, fullback, Ty Johnson.
I mean, really, the only players of note that they've lost because of free agency are what? Matt Collins and Amari Cooper. Well, I mean, they've only lost Matt Collins for sure. Amari Cooper hasn't resigned.
Is the only one gone. They replaced him with Palmer. Well, I think Cooper really is the one that's been replaced by Cooper. They're not going to get Cooper back. I think Palmer is a replacement for Cooper. So Douglas and Quentin Morris, I think, are the next most interesting names that haven't been signed from anybody. They don't necessarily need Quentin Morris because they have Kincaid and Knox. And Davis, I like too. I just like Morris also. But Douglas I guess, is the real, just because of their need at corner. But the guys they resigned are great. I think that's like, they didn't have to resign as much this year as in other years. So like, that's like probably B plus.
And they're getting ahead because all of those guys that they re-signed, Shakir, Bernard, Rousseau, those were all, even Allen. Yeah.
That's why that's an A. That's A plus, really. The extensions are A plus. I'm going to give a B plus for the resignings, and then free agency. I mean, C plus B minus, just because it's not like, you can only do so much. So if you average it, right? So it's like a B?
B?
Something
Yeah,
like that?
B.
Yeah, B.
A B. Yeah.
B. Let's give it a B.
B's good. 3.0.
Yeah, they still got 10 picks. 10 picks.
Yep.
They're gonna move up or down or both times in the draft. They're gonna do some moving in the draft. They have 65 players in their roster. They got a bunch more to go.
I think they already have 9 players on the defensive line, I believe. Someone is mentioning that. So like, they don't really have a lot of room for one more player at this point. I can't remember if they kept 9 or 10 last season.
For 53, yeah, but like they're going to get to they're at 65 now, so they're going to add 25 more players still.
Yeah, but I was just thinking like actual 53-man roster players from the defensive linemen they have right now. Like I think they're almost complete with that crew. Do you have the?
They're going to draft. Yeah, I got it up right now, but they're going to draft people. But for Defensive end / edge, they got Rousseau, Bosa, Epinesa, Solomon, and Hoyt. That's 5. And then defensive tackle, they have 6. Oliver, Daquan Jones, Dwayne Carter. Hold on.
Dwayne Smoot.
No, he's gone.
He's a free agent.
Yeah.
Am I thinking of Austin Johnson then?
No, I don't have him either. No, Oliver, Daquan Jones, Dwayne Carter, Larry Ogunjobi, Zion Logue, or is it Zion Logue? Zion Logue and Branson Dean. So they have 11 total on the defensive line.
Well, they're definitely keeping Rousseau, Bosa, Hoyt, 3. Epinesa and Solomon are pretty much sticking also. They're definitely not getting rid of Solomon. So that's 5 defensive ends that they're almost definitely going to keep. Defensive tackles, they're definitely keeping Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Dwayne Carter, and then it's up to Larry Ogunjobi, which is probably going to be, that's 9. So that's 9 players that are most likely going to stick on the 53-man roster. So I saw someone bring up the fact that, like, if they're going to trade someone out of that group of guys because they're looking to make room, Epinesa, exactly. Epinesa is probably on the trade block. And again, maybe you get a day 3 pick for him at this point, and you'd be happy with that. But yeah, keep Javon Solomon. He'll be in his 2nd season. A lot of upside still, especially pass. But yeah, John. So I want to say that my overall. So you gave it a B. I'm going to give it a C plus, and only because I'm glad that they extended all those guys that they did. Like, that's tremendous, right? They had the room to do that, and it gave them some cap space this season. I think that the free agency is pretty even and neutral at this point, to be honest. Actually, it's probably at this point, 24 hours later, like you said, I think it's actually a little bit negative because they haven't found a replacement for Rasul Douglas yet. When they do, I think it'll be closer to a B for me. But that kind of leads me into my next question is, we mentioned what kind of traits would you look for at a wide receiver if you were to get a new one? The draft starts tomorrow. They add no more players in free agency. All things being equal, what player or what position do you draft with your first round pick? Like, not even best player available, just like you can get the best player at any position. Which position do you take with your first round pick?
That's a good question. It'd be between a lockdown corner and I think take the Trey White replacement.
The Trey White replacement. Yep, I agree. You get one more corner like that, and all of a sudden my C plus goes to like a B, maybe even a B plus. If they end up getting that, if they get Asante Samuel Jr. in free agency, then all of a sudden my grade goes up. But for right now, it's about C plus.
What if you could get the next Bruce Smith?
That if they do, that would be amazing. Like, if they end up getting, this stud defensive tackle in the first round, I mean, all of a sudden, our defense looks a lot better, in my opinion. John Robert brings up, he says, it's only March. Totally agreed.
6 months to go.
And to me, I'm just like, only C plus. So I'm still, optimistic. I mean, again, this is a team that went to the AFC Championship game with the same talent, if not maybe a little bit less or a little bit more, right? Like, and they have 10 draft picks, like you said. They can only add more talent. And I think, and you may have alluded to this, but
AFC Championship game, the only player they really lost so far is Matt Collins.
Yeah, because Amari Cooper maybe doesn't count because he wasn't that big of a
We're still free agent, so like he's pending.
So really, it's just Matt Collins and Rasul Douglas at this point.
Well, Douglas is still free agent. He didn't sign with anybody, so we could still get him back. So you can't really count that yet.
So it can't count it against it. So it still might happen if they
just
bring
Matt
back
Collins. Oh, Kyrie Elam. Kyrie Elam's gone. Oh, and they released Sam Martin and Von Miller.
Oh, that's right.
They're gone.
Right. The Kyrie Elam though is kind of like a addition by subtraction, so that might actually be better. Again, I'm still wish that Jamarcus Ingram or someone else or Cam Lewis, anyone else, was in the AFC Championship game instead of Kyrie Elam at that moment, especially when the coaching staff saw him fall down on that play. Be like, get him out of there. Anyone is better at this point. Like that's I still hold that against the coaching staff. But anyway, I know why they did it. I just don't agree with it. But yeah, so I think there's a lot to be excited about. I want to see things shake out a little bit more in free agency.
And they're gonna bring some other people in for sure. There's a lot of corners still available. I'm not saying that any of those, whoever they sign, is going to be the answer, but they're going to have more depth, whether it works out or not. And they're going to draft. They're going to draft defensive backs. They're going to draft defensive linemen. receiver, running back. I know we're kind of overlooking the offense because they're mostly set. We don't know. Cook is the biggest question mark on offense, followed by receiver, just because it's a weird situation at receiver. But offensive line is great. Allen is great. They have capable tight ends. So
If you were to, so we mentioned if we were to add a wide receiver, we'd add a speedster. Doesn't matter what size. We need a guy that can just take a fly route. Hopefully, bring back that Josh Allen, deep ball, which we've been missing for a while. Like just a guy that can just stretch the field. Running back, you just mentioned. If you were to draft any type of offensive lineman, which we've mentioned previous podcasts, at least mine, and I think you agree with this, John. My philosophy is every year you draft at least one receiver and offensive lineman. Keep adding to that talent stash every year. Don't not do it. Do at least one of each, because you can never have too many wide receivers when you have a franchise quarterback. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. If you were to draft an offensive lineman, all things being equal, which position would it be? Because luckily we're bringing back the entire offensive line from last year. Who do you think would be the best at what position to bring for competition to even
interesting.
upgrade it?
Very interesting question, especially considering I think offensive line is by far their deepest position out of all their positions.
The strongest and deepest.
I think that's their best right now.
Yeah.
As far as the whole starters and depth included, offensive line is the best, which is good.
It's a
I
good
like
place
that.
to be.
I like that. Let's see if they have, I mean, a lot of guards and maybe another center to compete with for backup.
Oh, but they have Cedric Van Granger, right? Like,
I know. I mean, that's what I was thinking. I was like,
how about this, John? This is what my thought is.
okay.
Competition for David Edwards or Osiris Torrens at guard. Because I like both those guys, but I think that there's a possibility you could upgrade at one of those positions with the right player in the draft. Like if, let's say, the Bills go into the draft.
Guard is good. Yeah. And you don't have to spend an early pick on a guard either necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You could get one in the 4th round, potentially, that could replace or at least compete because at depth they have Alec Anderson, which we all like Alec Anderson, but
Torrance a lot. I don't think Torrance is going anywhere.
no, I don't think he is, but I think you could compete with him because, in reading Joe Biscaglia's grades, he said that, Osiris Torrance had a down year. He wasn't bad. He just wasn't as good as his rookie season. So,
maybe even though he's been good too, but
yeah, exactly. I think guard, if I were to, I think center, I think we're good. We have a good potential backup in that. I think we have 2 good tackles. John Robert just brought up hard to believe, but Dawkins is the oldest at 32, which is crazy, but he's still playing, at least at this point, he's playing his best football. Spencer Brown is playing amazing at right tackle. I think it's the guard position, honestly. I don't think if you can upgrade at center, sure, I'd consider it, but I think it's going to be more like a guard prospect that they draft this year. And I'm not against it because I like Vandemark or even Tylen Grable as the swing tackle right now. So I think the Bills have options there. It's just really guard. They don't have a ton of depth, and they could potentially upgrade at that position.
it's tough. They're really good at that position, and it's easier. Like if you got a tackle on the depth chart, it's easier for him to play guard than a guard to play tackle. So I don't know.
You're still saying center tackle?
I don't know if they can do anything. They're going to bring in camp bodies anyway, but I don't think anybody's going to overtake anybody. Like they're not going to spend a high enough draft capital to replace any of these guys. I don't think.
Okay, John. So last question. The Bills are picking in the draft, 1st round pick. The best defensive lineman, the best defensive end, defensive tackle are off the board. The best cornerback is off the board. What position do you pick at that role? Like what position is your biggest need?
Okay, so you're saying I got a bunch of players in that tier available, but
you can't take a defensive lineman or a corner.
So I would consider safety very strongly.
Yep, same safety, or I think this is a point where I would possibly look at a wide receiver. I know it's early.
I think it depends on who's there. I guess for any position. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. We're going to have to do some mock drafts coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Yes, we will.
That's what we're going to have to do. Once free agency is settled a little bit, We're gonna do some mock drafts, and we're gonna take a look at who might be available.
John Robert mentioned, I think David Edwards' contract ends after the season, which I believe he is correct. So that's another reason to go guard. Would
a
I
good
go
point.
guard in the first round? Maybe if someone fell, but I don't think the Bills
No.
value that position as much,
No.
So, yeah, dude, this has been a lot of fun going over all these players from front to back. I think that there is reasons to be optimistic. We haven't seen enough, but again, one of the great things about Sean McDermott and this coaching staff in general, especially with the secondary, but other places as well, is they do tend to coach up these players from other teams and make them into, very good players. Like think about not so much of the defensive line, but like think about, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. Like those guys weren't all pros when they came to Buffalo. They were kind of projects, and the Bills coached them up to being very good players. I think that's one of the things that the Bills have. So when I look at a Darrick Forrest, or I look at a Josh Palmer, or I look at, maybe even a guy like Ogunjobi, right? Like guys that have produced but not at a high level. Like I feel a little bit more confident because I think this coaching staff can get that out of them, especially on the offensive side where you have Josh Allen throwing you the ball. So I'm going to end on a high note there. John, anything you want to add before we end this free agency frenzy episode of Circling the Wagons?
They got a chance with him.
Absolutely. Amen. So thank you guys all for listening. Keep following us on all socials. We're at CTW Pod, like Circling the Wagons Pod. We're going to do some giveaways soon, I believe on Instagram with TSE Buffalo. So be on the lookout for there. Follow us there as well. A lot of good things, coming up, a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And I think that, we're going to have a lot more to discuss in the upcoming weeks. Do some mock drafts, John, do a little bit more. I like doing a little bit of research before free agency, but now is the time to okay, now we still know where we have our biggest needs, which I think you and I both agree are mostly on defense still, defensive line, backfield. I mean, basically anything but linebacker. And honestly, I still think they should draft a linebacker, just not early, for more added depth in case Milano's not there, in case something happens. But I think that, for the most part, our big board of needs is still defensive line, corner, safety, and then some other things sprinkled in that we've discussed in this episode. So that's what we'll be looking at in mock drafts for those types of players. And that's going to be exciting. So thank you guys all for listening. Please leave a review, subscribe, like, comment, all that fun stuff. Be sure to check out the giveaways that we're giving away. And thank you guys for listening. So signing off for John. Go Bills. Okay. There's a little bit of a lag on my end. So for me, Nate, go Bills. Thank you guys all for being a part of this. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you for listening to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Download and subscribe to us in your favorite podcast service. Email us at ctwpod@gmail.com. That's Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CTWPod. And most importantly, go Bills!
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, Nate.
Well, listen, the whole show is called Circling the Wagons. Say no more. I love it.